national history, that should be a member state competence. I really don't think that, I mean, it's theoretically possible to construct a European history which transcends all the member states, but I don't see a problem with teaching some of this. But at the end of the day, I think in each country people ought to know their own history from their own perspective. I don't think Hungarians know very much about the way in which the English bombarded Copenhagen during the Napoleonic Wars. I'm not sure that they need to. But then, you know, what does the Battle of Mohács mean to you? So, yeah, we have very divergent histories in Europe. It's useful to know a lot about it, but you can't know everything. I just learned the other day that for every French school child, 1515 is one of these iconic dates. What's that? Well, it's the Battle of Marignan. Do you know about that? I didn't either. The King of France beat a Swiss army. Marignan is now Marseille Airport. That's the only thing. That's what it meant to me. So what I'm saying is that there are areas which are best handled at the member state level. Higher education is clearly one of them. There are areas where there were bound to be overlaps. I mean, I'm prepared to accept that health and safety regulation should have an all-European food safety, for example, an all-European dimension. How it's actually implemented, I think, has to be a member state competence, but, and this is a real problem, the actual instruments of implementation do vary very widely from country to country. And I'll give you a concrete example. One day, one of my constituents came to me and said to me, why is it that in a market in Hungary, the melons, I think, but maybe it's the tomatoes, have to be arranged in very precise order. But when I go to Brussels to a market, they just throw them around any old way. And you know what they say to me, in Hungary it's the EU that forces us to do this. And the answer is no, it isn't. It's the process known as gold plating. The regulation comes out of Brussels with, let's say, 100 articles, it's a framework, it then has to be applied locally. And then in some countries they apply no great detail, in other countries in the most enormous detail. I'm afraid we are in the second category. So therefore the melons have to be in military order and ranking order, with the colonel at the top and private at the bottom. It's completely crazy. But they don't bother with things like that in Belgium. And then necessarily, because of the unevenness, the citizens understand that this is not quite right. There's something wrong here. So at that point, I think there should be greater leeway. And then crucially, at the state level, the national administration level, they should not have the capacity to blame it on the European Union, which is what is happening. They get a free ride. When I lived in London, I would say, please can I have such and such to say, I'm sorry, European rules don't allow us to do this. European rules, the hell with that. It's Whitehall, which gets a free ride from being able to fill up these EU regulations. I don't know how it works in Denmark, whether you over-regulate or under-regulate.
EU gets explained a lot also.
I'm sorry?
EU gets explained a lot also.
Oh, well, that's good to know, yes. Yeah. I'm glad that it's a universal phenomenon. It's very human, I think. Lucky that we've got somebody to blame, really.
Yeah. How about foreign policy now that I know Orban talked against the sanctions?
Oh, this is
Russia. Is that also a national area?
This is an area where the most arrant nonsense is talked. Hungary maintains all the sanctions, like everybody else. We deliver gas to Ukraine, reverse flow. We provide, I'm not sure how much, but very considerable quantities of aid to Ukraine, money. Hungarian soldiers, not at the moment, and Hungarian airplanes, again not at the moment, have been in the Baltic, Lithuania and in the Baltic airspace. The one area where we are in difficulties is energy. We are not completely energy poor, we're slightly better off than the Slovaks and the Romanians, Slovaks and Bulgarians, but we do depend on gas. Arguably, the switch from coal to gas, which started in the 70s, went too far. But it's a very different strategic issue. We produce a tiny amount of our own gas, so we have to import it. Well, how do you import gas? Either through a pipeline or through LNG, liquefied natural gas. In order to have a liquefied natural gas terminal, we need a seacoast. And unfortunately, since 1918, we haven't had one. Do we really want it back? Well, it's okay, you know, if you like sea bathing, and quite nice to have a bit of Dalmatia back and so on. Now, there is an LNG terminal almost on stream in Świnoujście in Poland. It's not quite ready yet. Not quite sure when it will be. It's always going to be next year, but maybe next year is 2015. But the interconnectors are not there. In other words, I think they're in the process of building a Polish-Slovak interconnector, which will eventually connect up with Hungary. I'm not sure what its capacity is. So that Qatari LNG, which would actually allow us to free ourselves from the Russian market, is still a long way away. There is also a plan, if you know your geography, one of the very first islands in Dalmatia is Krk. Very attractive if any of you have ever been there, where they're planning to build an LNG terminal in Croatia. Nothing is happening. We've been talking about that since 2007?
Actually, don't they have one in
About 10 years. About 10 years.
I think they have one in Lithuania, or it's very much on the way.
Yes, the Lithuanians in Klaipėda, but that's actually a pre-constructed LNG terminal, which was simply plugged in, taken by sea and plugged in. Well, I don't think you could pull one up the Danube, frankly. It's far too good. Now, my understanding, but it's obviously more complicated than that, is that the LNG terminal in Croatia is not being built because the Russians are putting a lot of pressure on it. It's not being built, fair enough. Now, at that particular point, we don't have an option. Just to complete the story, there's a small amount of gas which is coming through Austria. It's not enough, and some of it anyway goes on to Ukraine. So what can we do? Well, we have to do a deal with the Russians for gas supply for another 3 years. And we've got some changes in the contract which have sort of eased it a bit. And then the Russians, I think, are lying, that they keep talking about this Turkish stream on the bed of the Black Sea. I don't think it'll happen because I don't think they have the money. I simply do not think that they can shell out about $50 billion or euros. The Russian economy is in very, very bad state, terrible capital flying. But the project is there. And they're saying they're going to build it up to the Turkish-Greek border, at which point it's up to you what you do. So we've now got together with all the intervening countries, Macedonia, Greece, Bulgaria, not I think, Serbia, yes, and I think Romania is involved as well, that we think about an interconnector. Well, you know, I mean, maybe yes, maybe no. If it is, it's many years away. Have to find the finance, very difficult. You all know about Nabucco, wonderful idea, bringing Caspian gas through Turkey, no finance, failed completely. So, I mean, there are real problems here. And one other point is sustainables. Sustainables take a long time to, not so much to come on stream, but to provide a return, and they require a lot of investment. Hungary doesn't have that capital at that particular time. So I'm all in favour of sustainables. You will find wind farms in Hungary, you will find solar panels, and we do get quite a lot of sun. Not so much in winter, but in summer we certainly do. We get more than you do. On the other hand, we don't have a Gulf Stream, so it's fair enough. So basically, we are caught in an energy bind, and I think this is what we're really trying to do with Russia, is to say, okay, we will buy your energy for the next 3 years, and we will try in the interim to find alternatives. That doesn't mean, in my view, as you will find in the Financial Times and The Economist, that Orban is in Putin's pocket. It's not true, but it's a nice way of saying it. You know, it creates a scapegoat. Let's say, you know, that we see this over and over again, that Orban is terrible, he's a mini-Putin, the Putinization of Hungary. That was coined by Jackson Deal, whose name you may know, American journalist. I'm hopeful of meeting him next week and going to Washington. Ask him what his basis for this is. And I think a lot of this, again, is what I started out by saying, just superficial judgment.
Sorry to intervene, we have more or less time for one more question.
One more question? Okay.
Just your point about the multicultural society in Hungary. Can you say something about that?
Yes, of course, with pleasure. My virtual, you know, Hungary is a single constituency because we're a small country, so we're not broken up regionally, but my virtual constituency is southwest Hungary and also Buda. Now, southwest Hungary is basically Hungarian, Croatian and German speaking. Overwhelmingly Hungarian, of course. But you know, you do hear Croatian, you do hear German spoken. And there's a very, very, very liberal so-called nationalities law. There are local governments, which are minority local governments. I think there are 11 or 12 or something like that. And we regard ourselves as a model, to be honest with you. You know, street signs are up in all the languages, not in Budapest itself. We have a very loose language law, actually. I mean, you can put things up in English if you want it up in Danish. I don't think anybody would notice. Just another language law. You either put it up in Basque or Irish, it doesn't really matter. So at that level, we're very, very easygoing. There is a serious question with the Roma, of whom there are maybe 500,000, it's difficult to estimate, population of just under 10 million. It's a very, very mixed picture. There are dirt poor Roma, very, very miserable. Some parts of Hungary, well, basically South Hungary, south of Pécs, the Ormánság, always been a very poor area. The Hungarian Rust Belt, that's to say northeastern Hungary again, but they're also quite reasonably well-to-do Roma. It's the full spectrum. Are they integrated? Well, what does that actually mean? It means, are they regarded as Hungarian? Yes and no. Some are, some aren't. Some are very traditional. Do you know about the Marime? You know about the Marime? It's very interesting. The Roma actually have very, very, very strict pollution codes. And Marime fundamentally says that women are inherently unclean, especially when they're menstruating, which makes it very difficult to put a Roma family in a position where non-Roma are above them, let's say in a tower block, because that sense of the pollution which is above us is very, very powerful. It's just sort of declining, and there have certainly been cases where the Roma are an extended family system, so the clan system is still real, and there are well-attested cases of two young Roma men fighting, and one is in the process of being beaten to hell by the others. His wife comes along, rips off her skirt and flashes it. Fighting stops, because then they have to go through a very, very complex process of purification. Well, you know, let's be multicultural. Let's accept other communities do it this way.
So how do you think you should address this problem with these women?
Well, it depends. I mean, my own view is that every institutional and other possibilities should be given for Roma who want to leave the traditional Roma world and move into mainstream Hungarian society. They are almost all Hungarian speaking. Some of them will still speak Romani, some will speak a particular dialect of Romanian, but for the most part, they are, I would say